Good evening. We'd like to welcome everyone to this evening's webinar, Epilepsy and Mental Health, Facts, Tips, and Resources. I'm Laura Widener, and I lead the Epilepsy Foundation's advocacy efforts, which include our efforts to affect policy change at the federal and state levels, help people share their story with elected officials to drive that change, and educate people about legal rights and connect them to resources. An area that's been receiving a lot of attention in our country recently, both politically, so kind of my world, and in people's everyday lives, is mental health. As many of you might know and may have experienced yourself, people with epilepsy can experience changes in their emotions, which can be present most of the time or only occasionally, like just before, during, or after a seizure. This can be things like anxiety or depression, and we're going to talk a lot more about that this evening. The Foundation wanted to hold this webinar to educate about the intersection of epilepsy and mental health and provide tips and resources for if and when you or your loved one experiences mental health challenges. We actually held a similar session for parents at our recent advocacy conference, Teen Speak Up and Public Policy Institute in Washington, D.C. just this past February. And based on a great suggestion from some of those parents, we wanted to convene teens and young people for a similar discussion. So tonight's webinar is primarily intended for teens and young people with epilepsy. But if you're not one of those people, we welcome you as well. Basically, anyone who would benefit from this topic, we're happy that you're here with us tonight. I will moderate a panel discussion, and then we'll have time for Q&A towards the end. So before we get started, just a few housekeeping matters. Everyone's lines are muted. Please submit your questions using the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Again, we'll have time for Q&A towards the end of the hour. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel and reshared on our social media channels in the coming week. There is closed captioning available during this webinar. If you want to use closed captions, please ensure that they are enabled in your Zoom settings, and then there are instructions here on the slide. You want to try to look for that CC button on your toolbar. Click the up arrow to the right of CC, then click Show Subtitle. You can change the caption size there, and then you want to click View Full Transcript to review all of the captions, but hopefully that will be helpful to some of you as you follow along tonight. And final thing before we get started, and I introduce our great panelists. This webinar is intended to educate everyone, but we as the Epilepsy Foundation do not provide individual medical advice. We urge you to consult your healthcare team if you have any specific questions regarding your epilepsy and/or mental health care. So I'm very privileged and excited to introduce our lineup of speakers tonight. Kate Brocker is the Senior Director of Programs and Partnerships at the Epilepsy Foundation. The Foundation's Programs and Partnerships team strives to promote well-being and create safe environments for those living with epilepsy. Kate received a Bachelor of Science degree in nursing from Purdue University and a Master of Science in Nursing from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Kate is board certified as a family nurse practitioner through the American Academy of Nurse Practitioners. Prior to joining the foundation, she had experience as a healthcare practitioner and administrator in diverse clinical settings. Kate previously served as a university health services director and is a certified mental health first aid instructor. Next, we have Haley Lobline, a licensed psychologist specializing in pediatric neuropsychology at Children's National Hospital in Washington, D.C. Haley is also an assistant professor of psychiatry and behavioral sciences and of pediatrics at George Washington University. As a neuropsychologist, Haley helps families understand cognitive and social emotional concerns, explains how difficulties may relate to medical factors, and provides recommendations and resources for parents, families, medical providers, and schools. Finally, but certainly not least, we have Eleni Rizakos, a licensed clinical psychologist within the Neuroscience and Behavioral Medicine Division, with a specialized focus in the Comprehensive Pediatric Epilepsy Program at Children's National Hospital. Eleni is also an assistant professor of pediatrics and psychiatry and behavioral sciences at George Washington University, School of Medicine and Health Sciences. Eleni's area of expertise is pediatric psychology, working with a range of medical and psychological conditions in youth, including anxiety, depression, and coping with medical conditions like epilepsy. So we truly couldn't have a better lineup of experts here to educate us and help any of you who have or may in the future encounter mental health challenges. So again, I'll start with some questions for our panelists. Think of questions as we go and feel free to put them in the chat Q&A function. So first, Haley, I'm going to come to you. What are the most common mental health challenges for people living with epilepsy?
It's a great question. And so what we know about epilepsy and mental health is about half of the kids with epilepsy have some sort of comorbid condition like depression, anxiety, ADHD. There's a couple of ones that are a little bit more common, so I'll go through some of those now. So what we know just in general compared to, people who don't have epilepsy or medical conditions or even other medical conditions, that kids with epilepsy experience higher rates of different emotional. We can go to the next. So that includes anxiety and depression. So 1 in 4 individuals with epilepsy are diagnosed with anxiety or depression. And you can see here the rates can be really varied based on the kind of studies that look at it. So anxiety can be in about 5 to almost 50% of kids, and depression is in about 8 to 33%. So these are pretty high rates, but you can see really different depending on kind of how the researchers asked those questions. Similarly, ADHD is another one that's really common, especially compared to people in the general population. So almost 30 to 40% of individuals with epilepsy have ADHD, and kind of working the reverse way, about 14% of children with ADHD can develop seizures. Similarly, autism has some higher rates in the epilepsy population, so 6% compared to 1%, and about 10 to 30% of people with autism have epilepsy. So these things are all kind of happening together. And intellectual disabilities can occur in about 25% of people with epilepsy. And on the next slide, we have also just generally learning difficulties, so about 25% compared to 2 to 10%.
Great, thanks for that overview. My next question, we all have feelings, right? We have good days, we have bad days. When, Eleni, should people, maybe start being a little concerned about what's going on?
Yeah, so I think just first thinking about signs and symptoms, if we break it down a little bit, for depression, we might see it as symptoms of sadness or loss of pleasure, can even look like irritability, or it might look more physical in nature. So there can be changes in sleep or appetite, and that can go in either direction. So it can be increases in sleep and appetite or decreases. For anxiety, it might look like frequent worry or fears, avoidance of difficult or new situations. And then again, you can have these sort of physiological symptoms as well. So it can look like frequent headaches or stomach aches. for ADHD, you have those sort of typical symptoms that you think of in regards to difficulty sustaining attention or difficulty sitting still. Can also look like disorganization, though, losing items a lot, needing lots of reminders, having difficulty planning, starting tasks. And then with learning disabilities, we can think of it as really difficulty mastering areas of math, reading, or writing despite your best effort. And so, like you were saying, Laura, we all experience negative emotions or have hard days sometimes. That's a normal part of the human experience for sure. So the things that you really want to look out for are, is there a big major life change or stressor that has taken place? And really thinking about these symptoms that we talked about previously, are these symptoms occurring more times than not? And are they getting in the way of functioning? So are they getting in the way of your academic functioning? But that can also mean like your social functioning, the time that you're spending with family or friends.
Great, thanks. And again, all this stuff, I should have said it from the get-go, like all this stuff can be really hard, right? It's so important to be aware of, but they can definitely be tough topics both to like acknowledge and talk about. So Lenny and Haley, considering there are probably a lot of teens and young people on this webinar, how would you advise them to talk to their parents if they start feeling some of these things?
Yeah, so we sort of broke it down a little bit because, like you said, it can feel really overwhelming to talk to a parent or caregiver. First, when thinking about approaching them, we first want to think about when is a time and a place that you feel most comfortable. So it may not be in the morning when everyone has 1,000 things on their mind and you're trying to rush out the door, but finding that window where maybe the environment is more calm or low key. Definitely then planning ahead can also be really helpful. So thinking about how do you want to start the conversation? A lot of times, like you were saying, Laura, it's really hard to approach the topic. So even thinking about what are the first 1 or 2 sentences I want to say, and maybe even writing a script so that you're kind of practicing it or maybe even reading it to help you get started. We even have a sample script at the bottom there that you can use to help guide you a little bit. And then thinking about the topics that you want to cover. So wanting to share with that parent or caregiver how you are feeling. I'm experiencing a lot of sadness or a lot of worry, and talking to them about how it's been affecting your life, right? That's that part of how it's been impairing your functioning. And then also that request, right? Which maybe I want to get help with accessing a mental health professional and really going through those steps. And then also knowing that everyone is human. You're feeling kind of nervous or anxious, perhaps approaching the topic. The parent is feeling worried because they just want their child to be happy and safe. And so knowing that you may need to try again, right? The first time may not go as well as you want it to. And a second time can always help and make it better and help you get that cure that you want.
Great.
Yeah, and I think, sometimes there's a lot of concerns that come up about having a conversation. And so we kind of put together a couple of things that come to mind. So, maybe some concerns that you won't be taken seriously by your parent or your loved one. And so sometimes showing them evidence. So taking an online screener and showing where your symptoms are. Maybe you can gather some of the resources that you found about maybe the mental health disorder that you think is describing how you're feeling. Another common concern is just not really feeling comfortable just talking to your parent. Sometimes you don't want to talk to your parent first. And so you can always pull in another trusted adult that you have. So that could be, someone at school, like a counselor or teacher. Sometimes coaches can be really helpful, or a relative, an aunt, uncle, anyone else in your life that you feel like could kind of be on your side and help you have that sort of conversation. Sometimes people, they want to share, but they don't want to share everything with their parent. They've got some things on their mind, but parents don't want to, you don't have to tell your parent everything that's bothering you, and you're kind of concerned about that. And so you can, similar to that planning, identify ahead of the time kind of what you feel comfortable sharing, kind of the key points that you want to make. You could even write some of your concerns in a letter if you think you're going to have a hard time speaking to your parent. And then the last concern that we hear sometimes is, I just don't want to make my parent feel sad or upset or worried about me. I don't want to add something to their plate. And I think it's important to kind of just challenge that guilt a little bit and think of, how would you feel if someone that you loved came up to you and brought up their concerns? I think one piece of advice we always like to give is, what would you tell a friend in that situation if they were concerned about telling their parent? Because sometimes we're just kinder to our friends than we are to ourselves about these sorts of things.
Great, thanks for those tips. And I should have said at the outset too, May is Mental Health Awareness Month. That's another huge reason we're having this webinar at the outset of May. Again, both to educate and give people resources and tools to do something about it. So that's kind of a nice foray into my next question. What can people with epilepsy be doing to help proactively manage their mental health? And Kate, I'm going to turn it to you to start.
Thanks, Laura. And I'll keep this brief because we could talk about this for a long time, just like all these other really important questions and topics. But at the foundation, we really think it's important to take a holistic approach to how we manage mental health. And so holistic just meaning we look at the person as a whole and realize that everything is interconnected. So for example, if you don't sleep well, your mental health is going to be off the next day. Or let me say most people will feel the effects of a decreased amount of sleep. And so when we're looking at how do we manage our mental health, these are some areas that we've focused on providing resources regarding awareness and education. And so I'm just going to highlight a few of these. So for example, physical activity, if you can, be able to move, there are studies that show that even just brief walks, 30 minutes a day, can be just as effective as an antidepressant in treating like first line, like mild depression. So if people aren't out moving, I say definitely make sure to get out and do that. I try to combine some of these when I can. So if you have a friend or a family member, someone that sparks joy in your life, do it with a friend. So we've got social relationships here on the list. Once again, there's evidence too that shows just the power of our social relationships in our life and how that can also just impact our overall health. So that's really important to find. Sleep, as I talked about in my first example, for young adults or 18 over, really 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night is what's recommended. Sometimes I think our society, we wear a badge of honor that we don't sleep much. So I could talk for a long time about the importance of sleep, but that's just so critical to your overall mindset and how you're able to face the stressors that might come your way, especially for people with epilepsy, right? We know that sleep deprivation could be a possible trigger. So to really prioritize that and treat that like a priority for not only your epilepsy, but also for your mental health. Stress management, I say this one is the fun one. Everyone can find different ways to manage their stress. It can be as basic as practicing your breath, being aware of your surroundings, just taking a moment, maybe do meditation, mindfulness. These are all tools. And I know we're going to share some resources, but that don't cost any money and that you can do by yourself for just a few minutes. But it also could be just listening to music, talking to a friend, doing something that brings you joy. And so I say that looks different for every person, but finding a way, if you're feeling stressed, that you can effectively manage that. And then just lastly, I want to talk about the importance of diet and nutrition. So what we feed our body does impact our mood, does impact our overall health. And so those are just a few of the ways. We also have on here some other bigger items such as independent living and education and employment. all of those are important. If you can find ways that you can live a fulfilling life, and feel like you are contributing in the way you want to, and sometimes you have to get creative, maybe our plan A isn't available to us, but finding those outlets so that you can find that in your life can also make a huge difference for your mental health. So just going back to that holistic, as you can see in the wheel, they're all connected. So as one of these improves, the idea is that, say we improve our sleep, hopefully that can also help improve your mental health. So just keeping that in mind.
Great. So it's kind of like a really nice, like holistic, what should I be doing in like different parts of my life? And then Haley and Eleni, maybe turning it over to you for just some super specific, ways people can go about this.
Yeah, so we know that all those strategies that Kate mentioned are so important. And a lot of times we also know for all of us, it doesn't matter the age, they're easier said than done a lot of times. And so one piece that we wanted to include here were different apps and tools that can sort of help you practice, initiate, get into the rhythm of practicing those strategies. So we have them sectioned off into different areas here. So first, in terms of seizures, a lot of times I include the Epilepsy app, which is a seizure tracking system. I find that especially with seizures feeling so unpredictable and so uncontrollable, the Epilepsy app is nice because it not only allows you to track the seizure, but it also allows you to put in information regarding what happened before, what happened after, potential triggers, and it starts to help you gather information. The more information you have, the more in control you can feel, the more in tune you feel. And again, with such an uncontrollable situation, it can sort of help with that adjustment to coping with seizures. Then we also have listed different tools to assist with stress or low mood and anxiety. I like these tools. They're free to access, which I find helpful. And then also moving over to sleep, difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep or getting those 7 to 9 hours that we know are really good for us. These apps can be helpful. And then also in terms of executive functioning. So that can fall under challenges for attention, or even we might notice that it's hard to plan, organize, get started on tasks when we're feeling really anxious or our mood isn't feeling great. So there's a few recommendations there as well.
Great.
Thought it might be a good time to take a break about halfway through, quarter of the way through, to just do one of these kind of grounding activities. And this is like the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and it's easy to remember, and just something that you can do anywhere without anyone even noticing that you're doing it. And I also think, Lenny and I were chatting about this earlier. It's really important to practice these different skills. It's kind of like a toolbox that you have, and some tools work in different situations. But the important thing is that you're practicing these tools in times that you really maybe are feeling calm and relaxed, maybe at times of your day where there isn't anything that's stressful, because similar to if you are in a sport and you practice, right? You practice every day before your game day. And so similarly with these different techniques, it's important to practice them in times when you're feeling calm, so that when maybe you are feeling maybe more stressed or any other feelings that you're having, you're kind of more practiced and you can use that tool a lot easier. I hear that a lot with like breathing. We all hear to take a deep breath, but when you're stressed out and you haven't really practiced the deep breathing, it can be hard. So I thought this is an easy activity for everyone to do in their own home without speaking up. So everyone can look around them right now and just notice 5 things that you see around the room. So I see my computer, I see the color of the wall, and you can describe these things in as little or as much detail as you want. And then you think of 4 things that you can touch. And so you're going to physically touch some things around you. So I feel the case of my phone, the keys on my computer, the texture of my shirt. Then think of 3 things that you can hear around you. So sometimes you have to pause for a second. So I'll be quiet for a moment. So So for me, I noticed a clock ticking. I hear the little whir of my computer working really hard to do this. And then I hear in the distance, my nephews are downstairs playing, so I can hear them. Hopefully you all can't hear them. Then you notice two things that you can smell. Sometimes this is a tricky one, so you have to take a moment. We just had some cake, so I noticed the smell of that. And someone made some coffee. So just anything that you notice. And then taste is always the tricky one as well. But I brushed my teeth recently, so I can taste a little bit of that. So this is a great exercise that you can kind of do in any part of your day to just kind of help ground yourself, cool down.
Awesome, thank you. And I love that metaphor to like practicing before a game. It's a really, really good way to look at it. So, okay, say, people, maybe they've started to notice some of the signs, you guys talked about earlier, and maybe they've even talked to a loved one about like how they're starting to feel. What do they do next? Like, how do you actually access mental health services, and where can people go for help?
I think there's a lot of different places and resources that you can go to. So if you have an epilepsy team, you can really bring it up to almost any of the provider within the team. They all kind of work together. So the neurologist, sometimes there's psychologists or neuropsychologists like myself that are part of the team. Just anyone on the epilepsy team, your can help you. There's also other places in the community where you can access resources. So schools often have a lot of resources in terms of helping provide either resources at the school, or they know providers in your area that can help you. So you can talk to a guidance counselor, or a teacher can get you hooked up with someone who can help, even coaches, other people that you might know. And then last, there's lots of people, but pediatricians can also be really helpful resources in terms of finding people.
Great. So yeah, I mean, key thing there is definitely talk to, a member or members of your healthcare team. That's critical. There might be resources in the community. And then there's also us as the Epilepsy Foundation, so Kate and I work for the foundation, and our organization certainly offers some support for people experiencing mental health challenges or those who are in crisis. So Kate, I'll turn it to you to talk about some of the things that the foundation offers.
Thanks, Laura. Excuse me, the water didn't do the trick. So we, on this slide right here, have some Managing Epilepsy Well programs. And so these are programs that our offices offer across the country. So Laura and I work out of the national office, but we also have people just across the country, whether they're through our team, or also we have local affiliates. And so these programs, it sounds a little bit like their name, they're evidence-based programs that help people learn self-management skills so that you can ultimately manage epilepsy well. And so just a few, we have several listed here on the slide. I would encourage you to go to their website if you want to learn more, or on the next slide, I'll talk about our 24/7 helpline. But for example, like Hopscotch, these are all different acronyms. So they all spell out much longer listing programs, but Hopscotch is a program that's designed, say, if you're having trouble with memory, which is a really common side effect that people might experience. Hopscotch is a program that's designed to help people develop, better skills and techniques and aids to help with memory. Or Project Uplift is a mindfulness-based project that's also designed to help people with epilepsy that are experiencing depression. So these are a great resource. I also just want to plug that we are offering a new program this year. It's called the Chronic Disease Self-Management Program. And so we are offering that across the country. So if you are interested in checking that out, we will have lots of offerings for that. And so that's just a more general self-management based program that I would say anyone living with a chronic condition, but especially someone living with epilepsy, could benefit from. So we'd be happy to assist you in finding the offering that's closest to you. I do want to point out a lot of these programs are offered virtually. So even if they're not super, we try to get people connected as much as we can to the closest local resource, just for connection, community building, lots of reasons. But don't let that be a deterrent if you don't think that you don't have a local epilepsy office. As I mentioned, we're going to be also offering this from the national office. So we will definitely be able to get you plugged in if you are interested.
Great. And then you mentioned the 24/7 helpline.
Yes.
Can you talk
So
about
the
that?
yes, thanks, Laura. 24/7 helpline is an amazing service that our office is able to offer. So the helpline can answer your questions about epilepsy and seizures, just help you get connected. So if you are worried about your mental health and you're just trying to find a provider near you, this is something we can help with. If you're looking for a medication, if you're having any concerns about discrimination or employment issues, we just have a wealth of resources. So I would just encourage everyone to reach out. I do want to point out that our information and specialists are all trained and able to do a depression screening. And we also have relationships with appropriate mental health resources. We also, if someone is experiencing suicidal thoughts, we have those relationships where we can help make a warm transfer and get you connected. So just know we're here 24/7, and we're here to support you in whatever you might need.
Great. So yeah, if someone's like ready to start looking for a mental health provider, and I can speak from my own experience running any type of doctor. It's like there are so many out there. Eleni, could you talk a little bit about what people should look for when they're seeking a mental health provider?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think probably most of you maybe have heard the phrase cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. And this type of therapy is oftentimes referred to as the gold standard of therapy. And all that means is that this is a type of therapy that has a lot of research behind it in terms of identifying it as an effective form of therapy. It's often used to treat emotional challenges such as anxiety and depression. And the other important thing to know is that there are other types of therapies that can also be beneficial, that also have good evidence behind them. So oftentimes you might find a provider who says they do cognitive behavioral therapy, but also integrate other modalities like mindfulness or acceptance and commitment therapy. And this is really common and actually even encouraged because, like I think everyone has said in at different points, everyone's different, right? Everything isn't going to work for everyone. And so a provider that can be a bit flexible and also be receptive to what works for you, right? So if you know, oh, I really like mindfulness or I really like meditation, you can also request that from your provider, see if it's something that they're familiar with and if they can integrate it in. The other point that I wanted to add in was executive functioning coaching. So we know attention and executive functioning challenges are often pieces that come up with epilepsy. And so in this area, we have therapists who can integrate executive functioning supports, but there's also individuals who just identify as executive functioning coaches who will just focus on the EF work. And so what they're going to do is they're going to teach strategies to help with sustaining attention, getting organized, being able to plan out tasks, being able to start tasks. A lot of times this is revolved around schoolwork, right? You get these big projects that are due in a month that require 20 steps. And how do I even approach this? So it is really nice because it can be a hands-on intervention where you're actually bringing your work to this coach and saying, okay, don't know where to get started. And then the last few tips, I always like to highlight that connecting with your therapist, even playing games during therapy to sort of decrease anxiety in the moment can be really helpful, but it should rarely be the primary mode of therapy. So what we really want to focus on in therapy is that you're setting goals on what symptoms you want to decrease and the strategies you would like to increase, learning those skills and then setting out to practice them outside of therapy. And then lastly, goodness of fit, which just means we want you and your mental health provider to be able to have good rapport, establish a good relationship. This is important in general, but especially for your therapy provider, because you're going to be talking about the things that feel difficult, the things that are hard, and we're only going to feel comfortable exploring those pieces if we have trust and a good relationship with that provider. So that out of everything is the thing that we want to focus on, and also let you know that if it doesn't feel like a good fit, it's very common to then seek out and look for a different mental health provider, or even give that feedback to your therapist and ask, is there someone else in their practice who you could potentially try work with?
Great. So within, there's the phrase mental health provider, but there are a few different types. So Haley, could you talk about the difference between psychology and neuropsychology and psychiatry?
Yeah, there's a lot of terms that are very similar. So usually this is just a general breakdown, and there's a lot of overlap between them. But typically, if you are struggling with mood, anxiety, some behavior difficulties, usually psychiatrists or psychologists are a good way to start. And the main difference is that psychiatrists have medical training. And so they typically are the ones that can prescribe medication, although in some states that's not the case, but a psychiatrist would be primarily for helping figure out medication management. And then in terms of seeking therapy, there's lots of different people who are not just psychologists, but social workers, licensed professional counselor. There's a lot of different names for people who are trained to help and do individual therapy with you. And then finally, I'm a neuropsychologist. And so our role is really, we are psychologists, but we have some additional training to try to understand the relationship between the brain and behavior. So what are the seizures, how are the seizures or the medications that you're taking affecting your learning, your memory, attention, and we kind of help families understand resources in the community that can kind of help with, both their strengths and weaknesses.
Great. And then, the last few years have been added some additional layers of challenges, right? And I think we've all seen headlines about, increased mental health needs and, access to therapists. And so when people are seeking mental health care, it's super important, but there are also challenges and barriers that come up. So I think that's an important thing to educate people about, just so that they can prepare for those. And I'll turn it over to any of you who want to step in to just kind of touch on some of those challenges people might encounter and give any tips for getting past them.
Yeah, I think there's just a lot of different barriers, and we can see them all on the side. There's just not enough mental health providers, or maybe not enough that are a good fit for you. Some people don't have enough time, or insurance coverage, I think, is also a big issue. And so the thing that we always recommend is to just try to get on as many different wait lists as you can, and to try to not get discouraged. You even staying on the wait list after you start, similar to what Eleni was saying, that goodness of fit, maybe who you start with isn't who you stay with for a longer term. Your insurance company is also a good place to start in terms of finding people who can help. And then if you're really having a hard time finding them, the nice thing, that we've learned through the pandemic is that we can do some work through, Zoom or remotely. And so telemedicine is a great new tool that maybe if there's no one in your area, there might be someone further away that you wouldn't actually have to travel to. You could just meet with them virtually.
Great. So we're kind of nearing the end of the moderated part, but before we move over to questions from the audience, just want to give any of you an opportunity, any final tips for addressing mental health for yourself or for your loved one, depending on who's on tonight.
Excuse me. I just always like to remind everyone that when you're struggling with anything, it can feel isolating, and especially mental health. And maybe, if your life has been impacted by epilepsy and mental health and you're frustrated, maybe you can't drive or you can't do things that you always, used to do or want to do, or that your peers are doing, that can feel isolating. And so I just always like to take a moment and remind everyone that you're never alone. There are always people that are available to help. Even if I hope that people have people in their immediate circles, whether it's your friends or family, but I recognize it's not a perfect world. So we don't all have those situations. So that's where we talk about our 24/7 helpline. There are lots of other helplines too. And I know we're going to have resource slides, but I just want to remind people you're never alone. There are a lot of free resources out there, and there's never any problem, that's too big. That's why I always want to remind people, like, there is no problem that is too big. It might feel like that, but there are just so many people that, can help. So just to keep that in mind if you're feeling overwhelmed.
Great. All right. So we'll move into Q&A. I do see some in the Q&A section. I think hopefully if I'm skilled enough, I can see them. So let me just take a second to kind of read through, and I'll read out the first question. So we have a question, someone whose son has been dealing with refractory epilepsy for a long time, 25 years. They've been noticing under situations of stress, winning, losing, they seize. Is this considered a mental health consequence of epilepsy? Is this common in people with refractory epilepsy? And is there treatment available for helping with these situations?
That's a great question that you definitely want to talk to your provider about, specifically about your situation. In general, we do know that epilepsy is, a brain-based disorder. And I think a lot of times people think about epilepsy as seizures, right? Like that's the main thing. But, your seizures are happening in your brain, and epilepsy is can affect different parts of your life. So there definitely is, there's this idea that there's a bidirectional relationship between mental health difficulties and epilepsy. And so sometimes people have some mental health like anxiety, depression before they were even diagnosed with epilepsy, and sometimes it goes the other way. So there's a lot of interconnectedness, and for your specific case, I wouldn't be able to tell you. And I think, talking to your provider about that, but always good to think of, connecting with a psychologist or someone as well to learn strategies to help manage stress is helpful regardless of the cause or what's happening.
Yeah, so great question. And thank you, Haley, for some of those general tips. And just to reemphasize Haley's point, really encourage reaching out to your own healthcare provider to get advice on your specific needs. But thank you for providing a general response there. Next, we have a question. What are some treatment options being used by providers in treating co-occurring depression and epilepsy to improve patient quality of life? And they give some examples, maybe like effective behavioral therapies, AEDs that assist in treatment of psychosocial symptomology in youth with epilepsy. Sorry, I only laugh because I was struggling with that word. So I'll open that up to the panelists.
Yeah, I think too, definitely everything that was listed there. I mean, those are all great starts, right? Those are the pieces that we've been sort of touching upon in terms of being able to access therapy. And that can be via cognitive behavioral therapy, but it also can be via, like Haley was describing in that one slide, via medication through a psychiatrist, or also resources and obtaining more information via neuropsychology. I think we know that it's not always offered in all epilepsy clinics, but when possible, we hope that we kind of have that sort of integrated treatment, right, where everyone is working together, because we can almost think of it like a stool with three legs, right? Like those three legs help support one another, and when one is taken out, the stool just doesn't work as well. So we sort of think about it like if we're having mental health challenges along with the medical pieces, if we can pull in, right, all the legs of treatment, they're going to help support one another and also make each other more effective. So I think therapies, from talking like cognitive behavioral therapy to medication, and then definitely having all those providers connect with one another and provide sort of that comprehensive care, I think is really important.
Great. Next question. What are some strategies or tips for coping with the anxiety caused by the unpredictability of seizures, both for a child with epilepsy and for parents, because it, definitely hits the whole family?
Yeah, the loss of control and the unpredictability that's a real challenge and a natural thing, to produce anxiety. So some of the things I just wanted to talk about, first is just recognizing that's a normal reaction, but something proactive that we can do, you can't control the unpredictability, unfortunately, is having a seizure action plan, which we have examples of those on our epilepsy.com. But what that is just a plan that details what to do when you have a seizure, and making sure that the people in your immediate circle, like definitely family members, if your child goes to school or to work, that just as many people in their life as appropriate, that just making sure that they know that they have that seizure action plan, and so they know what to do and how to best support you and or your child, is a great first step. I also want to mention too that we have support groups across our country. And so, and a lot of those are offered virtually now. And so that's something that it's really helpful sometimes to talk to others, and just be able to talk about the feelings you're having, and finding that support with people that know what it feels like to go through that can be really powerful. And then also I do want to mention that if it's at ever a point, which we kind of talked about at the beginning, where you feel like the anxiety is so intense, or so, it's impacting your ability to go about your daily life, then of course that would also be beneficial to make sure you find someone that you could talk with, whether that be a therapist or a provider.
Great. And yeah, to add?
I was just gonna say that's a great overview, I think. And I this is such a common concern too. So I think recognizing that you're not alone about that anxiety and the difficulty coping. And I think it's great too, as a parent, to recognize when you are also feeling that anxiety, because I think, most parents, their first goal is to protect, but sometimes that overprotectiveness can end up getting in the way of independence building. And so it's a really tough balance as a parent to walk. And so talking with your providers as well about how to manage that balance. And maybe you don't need to see a psychologist or a therapist for long term, but maybe just a short term, helping you figure out what do we do in this moment? How do we kind of balance that protectiveness and independence building?
Great. We have a few more questions, so just watching time, I'm going to try to get to as many as we can. Are certain epilepsy programs geared towards a particular age group? If so, which ones are for adults?
Can clarify, at least the ones I mentioned, like all of the Managing Epilepsy Well and the chronic disease self-management programs are all for 18 and up. Several are being studied, and like I said, they're all evidence-based, so they have to be studied and make sure they're effective. So research is being done, so hopefully we can also offer those to the younger teen, but right now those programs I mentioned are predominantly 18 and up. Support groups, that really varies. There are support groups for all ages, so that would be something, once again, that we can just help let you know what the resources are, but I think those are the two that I mentioned.
Great. And Kate, I think this one's for you as well. Is the helpline provided via text?
Not that I am aware of. I think you just call. I don't believe we have the texting function at this time. But there are several helplines that, like, I know we can put those in maybe in the chat for you all as follow up, but like with the National Suicide, that there are texting options. So if that's your preferred mode of contact, not for the Epilepsy 24/7 helpline, but if you're concerned about mental health, there are texting options out there.
Great. Someone asked if any of you know of any good journaling apps.
I don't know of any, I haven't heard one over and over again. Usually I use my patients as great resources because they trial all the apps and they tell me which ones work out the best. I think the thing that I like to emphasize in terms of journaling, because it can be a really, really great resource and coping strategy, is just the routine of it. So you can access whatever is easiest, right? If you have your phone with you at all times, if you have an iPad with you, you can use the Notes app, you can use whatever you want. I think the, like Haley even pointed out earlier, the practice is really important, right? And so same thing for journaling. If it's going to be hard to get to the app, but it's really easy to just open up a draft of an email and not send it to anyone and put it in there, then that's what you use. Whatever is easily accessible and whatever is going to be the thing that encourages you, right? If it's like just a really pretty app and I like the way it looks, and that's the one for you. If it's the one that's easiest to get to, then that's the one for you. So whatever is just going to help create that routine for you, where you can do it on a regular basis. I think that's the most important part.
Great. The next question is, does the Epilepsy Foundation give recommendations for finding a new neurologist? The person expresses that they'll be moving soon. So I can take that one quickly. Yes, just call our 24/7 helpline. And that's one of the many resources that they can help you with. So please reach out to them. Next question. We have a lot of great ones. So thank you all for submitting. How do you sort out depression versus effects of anti-seizure medication? And the person indicates that their daughter is on 5 medications and struggling with severe depression. So yeah.
I think with parsing that out, I mean, I think probably we're all thinking similarly in terms of it's really important to talk with your epilepsy provider, and they are going to ask the appropriate questions in terms of when did the symptoms start, or when do you think the symptoms started? When do you feel like they worsened? And then also they have that information, that knowledge about which seizure medications can potentially play a role in those symptoms, right? And so they will put all that good information together in regards to when the symptoms started, how they're going, what medications your child is on, and be able to tell you, we likely think that this may be a result of the medication. And if that's true, are we able to change that medication, right, to help decrease the severity of symptoms or even have them go away altogether? If it's not related to seizure medication, or maybe we still have to try to stay on this medication, then again, it's important for them to recommend seeking mental health care so you have that support, because the strategies are going to be the same, whether, like I think Haley and Kate were both saying, whether it's depression that started prior to epilepsy, as a result of epilepsy, as a result of epilepsy medication, still that therapy intervention can be helpful, but definitely important to bring that up with your epilepsy provider.
Great. I think I have 2 more questions and then we'll move on to the next section. Someone asked about the Epilepsy Foundation has a seizure diary, and it sounds like that seizure diary used to have a function where they could input notes and print those out in order to hand them to their healthcare provider. And that part of the app doesn't seem available anymore. So they were asking if anyone can recommend a good seizure diary app. And that might be, yeah, we have a lot of mental health focused, professionals on here. We can follow up with you. We have your name. We'll talk to some of the MDs who, epilepsy specialists who might have some recommendations there. And then last question might fall in the same category. We might have to follow up with you, but asking, the person says that they have complex partial seizures and no auras, and asking if anyone knows of a device that they would recommend that they can record themselves when a seizure comes. So again, that might be more of a question we handle offline. Okay, great. But great questions.
And
yeah,
there is also, sorry, Laura, there is also an app called it's Seizure Log. It says track it. I know, Kate, I don't know, you're nodding. It has like a quick capture button that I think records seizures pretty quickly. So you don't have to, do 5 clicks before you can record. I think it makes it pretty quick in terms of recording.
Great, thanks. And again, the 1 or 2 questions we couldn't provide a ton of information on, we'll try to follow up with you after the webinar. And I thank everyone for their great questions. We have kind of like go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I saw like a really good question in the chat that I was scrolling through, and they were kind of asking, sorry, I thought it was a helpful question for a lot of people. They were asking about how to find a provider who knows about epilepsy and, the challenges there. I think that's such a good question because, right, epilepsy is really unique. And so typically what I would say is that providers like psychologists who are affiliated with hospital systems or who have done training in hospital systems, that would be a good start because they have at least knowledge. If they don't have specific knowledge about epilepsy, they often have knowledge about other different disorders that kids might have, medical disorders. So they usually are a good start. But also any good clinician or therapist should also want to learn about your experience, and they can also educate themselves about how to best support you. So bring that up in your first session with them. I think that's a really a great question, and talk to them about it. Ask what they know about epilepsy and how they can help.
Thanks, Haley. And you reminded me, I should plug that the Epilepsy Foundation, we have a learning portal where this is where we have our seizure first aid offerings, but we also have a 7-part series that's designed for that very issue, because that's something I've seen so much where people kind of get punted back and forth between, oh, I don't know epilepsy, and you need to see someone for mental health and mental health back and forth. But anyway, we have a 7-part behavioral health series. So if you find a therapist that you love and they're just like, I don't know that much about epilepsy and that makes them nervous, please, we can drop that also in the chat, but that's a free resource that they can go and check and learn at. And we designed it very much for that in mind, just for educating behavioral health providers about epilepsy and the kind of the common mental health things that occur. So it's a great resource.
Great. So again, I apologize if we didn't get to all the questions tonight just due to time. But did want to again plug our 24/7 helpline here. Feel free to follow up with the foundation and we can get you whatever information and resources you need. We do have a little more here, but the next thing I totally off topic, but it's coming right up, and we wanted to let especially those of you in the Washington, D.C., Maryland, Virginia area know that the Walk to End Epilepsy is like fully back in person this year. If you live in the D.C. area, this Saturday, May 6th, we'll have a Walk to End Epilepsy at Nationals Ballpark in D.C., so we urge you to check that out. If you're not in the D.C. area, we have a lot of walks across the country. So just go to walktoendepilepsy.org and you can try to find one nearest to you. And again, as I said, we have one little last little but important part of this topic, and I'll turn it to Eleni to kind of transition us into that.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. So we wanted to sort of take a pause, say thank you for joining, and say that the next few slides that we're going to go over, the last slides of the presentation, and they're going to be covering suicidal thoughts. And suicidal thoughts are as serious as any other medical emergency. And so that's why we wanted to make sure to cover it a bit today. Our goal with these slides is for you to know the risks, the warning signs, protective factors, and then resources to have that can help. With that said, we know that this topic can feel overwhelming, and depending on your emotional state, you may feel like this is not the time that you feel like you can take in this information. So what we're going to do is we're going to have 3 slides covering suicide. We're first going to start with very important but basic information regarding crisis resources, and then we're going to gradually cover more in-depth information. The second slide will include articles that can provide you with more information for if you want that in the future. And then lastly, we're going to go ahead and cover, review the risk factors, warning signs, and protective factors. So if you feel like you can't take any of this information in today, you're welcome to sign off now. And I think, like Laura said, this is going to be posted so you can have access to this information in the future if you need it. You're also welcome to log off at any point as we move through the 3 slides. I think, like Kate was saying, ultimately, we just want you to know that you're not alone, from family and friends to your epilepsy team, to the Epilepsy Foundation, to, you know, having these crisis hotline numbers. We want you to know that there's support there if you need it.
All right, thanks, Lonnie. So I'll just give a few seconds if folks want to sign off. Thank you again for joining tonight. And for those of you who want to stick with us, I'll transition to the next slide.
Okay, so these resources are really useful. The first number that we have is the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, and this is a new number. So it's 988. So similar to 911 that you would call if there was a medical emergency, we now have the number 988, and it is 24/7, and it's going to link you directly with a trained counselor who will provide you with support and connect you to resources if you need them. Then we also have below that the Trevor Project. They are also 24/7 crisis interventions specifically for LGBTQIA+ youth and young adults. Their number, similar to 988, is 24/7 and confidential as well. And then I know someone was asking about texting before, because sometimes that is just easier to do. So both of these lines have texting resources as well. So you can see the crisis text line, the word that you text is home, and then Trevor Project, you have that number and you text start. And both of those will link you again directly with a trained counselor. And then at the bottom, we just have the National Alliance on Mental Illness. NAMI is just a great resource where they have a lot of good information, not only about receiving support for suicidal thoughts, but mental health in general.
Great.
So then this next slide is a good one if you want to screenshot, or again, we'll have it posted, but wanted to include some articles that if you listen to this information and you feel like you want to learn more on your own or read more on your own, these are good resources, good places to go to. So we have articles talking about experiencing suicidal thoughts, to depression, coping with grief, what happens if you talk with a teacher, going to a therapist. So I think a really good, well-rounded list of articles that you can read, and also easy to read as well.
Great.
And then lastly, we just wanted to touch upon a few points. So we really wanted to talk about suicide because in the general population, it's the second leading cause of death for youth ages 10 to 24. And what we also wanted to highlight is that talking about suicide doesn't cause anyone to feel suicidal. I know sometimes that is that sort of feeling that comes up, that we don't want to ask, or we don't want to talk about it because it's going to make it worse. We know from research that that's not actually what happens. And in fact, actually talking about mental health and suicide can help prevent suicide. just to give you a little bit more information about risk factors, both to recognize for yourself or for your loved ones around you. Risk factors include mental health challenges, so depression, anxiety, that can be trauma, stressful life events, bullying, hopelessness, and then especially access to lethal means and prior suicide attempts. Those are especially high risk factors for individuals. In terms of looking out for warning signs, that can include depressive symptoms, anger, major loss, exposure to violence, feelings of hopelessness, and then more serious warning signs, right, include giving away possessions, saying goodbye, researching ways to commit suicide or suicidal statements. We also want to highlight the protective factors, right, because there are things that help protect us from experiencing suicidal thoughts. That is connectedness to family and friends or your community, feeling a sense of purpose in life. And that means engaging in anything that feels like a value to you, that feels important to you. Being able to practice problem-solving skills, coping skills, and access to mental health care. So that's why we really wanted to highlight those crisis resources, because they're 24/7. And then we also wanted to include what to do if a friend is talking about suicide, because I know that comes up often with our youth, with our teens. So we wanted to highlight not to wait to ask if they're doing okay, or if they're experiencing depressive symptoms, if they're having suicidal thoughts, because maybe you're noticing some of the warning signs, or you've noticed that your friend has some risk factors. If they confirm that they are having suicidal thoughts, we want you to offer to go with them to tell a trusted adult. And if your friend doesn't feel like they want to tell anyone, we want you to go ahead and tell a trusted adult. And I know this part can be really, really hard, and it can feel like you're betraying your friend's trust. And, you know, they told you this in confidence, maybe. And also we want to emphasize that, right, we know the cost is potentially a life. And so that's too great. And so we want to really empower you and encourage you to feel like you're prepared to seek out a trusted adult or reach out to any one of those crisis hotlines, those crisis resources. So again, we have that 988 number listed at the bottom there. And just overall, we really hope that you feel like you have a little bit more information to receive help, right, if and when you need it anytime in the future. And I feel like, you know, even with talking about mental health and mental health challenges, I feel like the really incredible news is that out of the 100 other things all of the participants could have done today over this past hour, they decided to join us for this talk. And so you decided to sort of take that step towards supporting your mental health. And so I think, you know, we all feel really impressed by you for doing that, and also just feel really grateful that we could be a part of it.
Thank you so much, Eleni, Kate, and Haley. And yeah, similar to what Eleni was sharing, you know, we realized it was a lot, especially those last few slides. But it's important information for us all to be aware of, and to have tools and resources if and when these challenges come up. That's what May being Mental Health Awareness Month is all about, talking about it and just giving people the resources that they need to take care of themselves and their loved ones. So I just want to echo her and all of our panelists. Thank you for joining us tonight. This webinar was recorded, so if you think it would be useful to others, you know, we will circulate it, and please feel free to share it with them. And just with that, you know, just urge everyone what this is all about, right? Take care of yourselves. You know, let's all proactively do things that we can to keep ourselves healthy, both physically and mentally. So thank you so much to the experts here for providing this great advice. Thank you to all of you for joining. Have a great evening, and everyone take care of themselves. Good night.